Well, Mr. Chairman, friends, first of all, might I say what an honour it is to be invited here to speak at this increasingly successful venue. I've been looking at my newspapers throughout the week, and I've been amazed by the galaxy of talent which Joe and the organising committee have managed to bring here, and I feel very honoured to be allowed to come into their slipstream and to address you. And can I thank you kindly, Chairman, for your kind words as well. I've come here today bearing two things. One, what I want to say myself in written form, and two, what I did say on relevant, related subjects some while back to a thing called the Liberal Society in Dublin, where I expressed a few thoughts on the subject of constitutional reform. And I've left my paper here available on that subject because I don't intend to deal with that here today. There's another session coming on this evening. And I was reflecting that the organisers of the MacGill Summer School probably hoped that in this slot a number of contributors would lay out for your consideration a series of papers in which a vision for Ireland and a programme of action as to how we should extricate ourselves from the current economic travails. And I have to say that I doubt that this is the moment for visionary economic statements. Repairing the damage caused by the fiscal and banking crisis is our first priority. Dealing with the catastrophic implosion in the governance of our banks and its consequences requires that capable people now roll up their sleeves, go down into the engine room and put things right. And I think the repair team toiling down there at the burst boiler really doesn't need to hear visionary statements coming from the bridge. But I think that, having said that, if I were asked for some views on the economy, I don't think that Ireland needs a very different economic vision from the one we had 5 years ago. While we certainly need to ensure that we learn the lessons that we put in place, and we have to put in place measures that will prevent another property bubble and another credit bubble and things going wrong in the way they did. The fact remains that rebuilding our prosperity and ensuring economic success demand of us that we do many of the same things in the future that we were trying to do, however successfully or unsuccessfully, in the past. Our best economic strategy remains one in which we, as a small open economy, become and remain competitive as a location within the European Union for the provision of high-value goods and services, in which we attract as great as possible a share of the available inward capital investment, in which we maximise the educational skills of our people, and in which we craft our regulatory and tax regimes to give ourselves the maximum comparative advantages, building on our language, our location, and our competitive advantages in the European Union. And we need more than ever an economic and taxation policy which incentivises hard work and rewards innovation and risk-taking. And I say that in the presence of Don Thornhill, whose words in his recent report I wholly endorse and hope that they will sometime translate themselves into reality through the actions of elected politicians. All of those things really haven't changed, all of those factors for Ireland's economic recovery. And listening to John Fitzgerald, there are imponderables as to how quickly our recovery will come, but I believe that those issues that I've just mentioned are, in fact, the basic recipe for Ireland's economic prosperity. And we don't have to, simply because things went so drastically wrong, we don't have to say we need an entirely new set of economics or we need an entirely new economic ideology. The reality of Ireland's situation in the world is quite different. We need to make things work well. We need to have accountable politicians. We need to have accountable administrators who do their job well. And I am very optimistic that all of those things will happen. And despite the gloom at the moment, I'm very optimistic that our recovery will come. I've chosen a very different theme for my contribution here today, and I want you to lift your gaze to the not too distant horizon, the Ireland of 20 years hence, and I'm presuming by then that we'll have overcome our present economic woes, and that we will, one way or the other, have sorted out the right way to deliver health services and the right way to protect our children. I want to look at a different issue, and that's how the two parts of Ireland will relate to each other and interact with each other at that future date. And I'm approaching it this afternoon from the perspective of what I describe myself as an Irish liberal Republican. And I make no apology for saying here that I favour Irish unity. And I believe, very much like Gareth Fitzgerald, that Irish independence was and is a good thing for the people of this state. I don't believe that we would have a fairer or better society, socially or economically or any other way, had Ireland remained part of the United Kingdom. Our Constitution was amended in 1998 to accommodate the Good Friday Agreement, and it speaks now in Article 3 of the firm will of the Irish nation, and I emphasise the following phrase, in harmony and friendship, to unite all the people who share the territory of Ireland, of the island of Ireland, and this is another important phrase, in all of their identities and traditions. And it recognises that a united Ireland shall be brought about only by peaceful means and with the consent of a majority democratically expressed in both jurisdictions in Ireland. So the bits that I just want to draw out of that article for your attention are the phrase in harmony and in friendship and the reference to all in all the diversity of their identities and traditions. It's now 12 years since the people of Ireland in both parts of the island strongly embraced the set of international agreements which on their face give to the people of Northern Ireland a free democratic choice between unity and union, and which commit the people of both the Ireland and the United Kingdom forever to abandon the notion that force can be used to determine that issue. It took 9 years from the Good Friday Agreement until the St Andrews Agreement for these new arrangements to bed down. And we now have, thank God, a functioning power-sharing executive in Northern Ireland with very significant powers of government, including policing and justice, of recent weeks. I think it's now time to think aloud about where Ireland is going and to ask ourselves, as citizens of both parts of this island, not merely what the future holds for those two parts, but also, much more importantly, what we can do and what we should be doing in building and shaping Ireland's future. Now, I'm going to quote one more article of the Constitution to you, which is not often quoted. It's Article 7 of the Constitution, which states that the national flag is the tricolour of green, white and orange. And it's generally accepted that that flag has its origins in the revolutionary fervour of 1848 and that it was originally brandished as a flag by Thomas Davis in the context of the Young Ireland movement. And its symbolism is obvious, and that is that Irish nationality or identity is based on a recognition and reconciliation of two distinct elements, the green and the orange traditions. But it was only really in the period 1916 to 1921 that the tricolour, which was flown over the GPO in 1916, became the public symbol of Ireland's independence movement. Then it became the flag of the Irish Free State, and subsequently, as that article in the Constitution says, became the flag of the Irish Republic. And I think that for citizens of the Irish Republic, the significance of the tricolour is now especially challenging. We're fond and proud of the tricolour. We regard it as the symbol of our liberty, our sovereignty and our independence. But the question that I'm putting to you this afternoon is, do we really face up to the implications of the orange panel in our flag? The tricolour is not the mutant thing that you sometimes hear about in poetry and ballad, the banner of green, white and gold. It is a flag of green, white and orange. And we're all disgusted, and rightly so, when it's used as a banner of hatred, whether in the hands of recreational rioters or as a backdrop to men brandishing weapons in balaclavas. I think it's now high time for all Irish people of all traditions on both sides of the border to ponder the meaning of that flag, especially in the post-Good Friday Agreement era. Now, in what I'm saying to you this afternoon, I'm taking the orange panel not as symbolising just, say, the Orange Order, orange marches and the like, But I'm taking it as symbolising something much wider and broader and deeper and older than that, and that is symbolising all that is Irish but is not Gaelic and Catholic. And if you'll allow me to adopt that as my definition of what the Orange Panel is all about, I'm including in that panel the Anglicans, the Presbyterians, the Methodists, the Quakers, the Evangelicals, and many others. I'm including the history and heritage of Georgian Ireland, Victorian Ireland, the Ireland of the big houses, the Ireland of the yeomanry, the Ireland of the planter towns. And I'm including great institutions as well, like Trinity College, the Royal Dublin Society, the various royal societies and colleges, King's Inns, and many more institutions. And I'm also including in that term, the Orange, the rich cultural heritage that lies in their literature, their poetry, their art, their folklore, urban and rural, and their music. And I'm including in it great figures such as Berkeley, Swift, Rowan Hamilton, the mathematician and philosopher, Field, the composer, Shaw, Yeats, Beckett, and great political figures such as Grattan, Carson, and Craig. And there are many, many more people that I could include in that bracket of people who represent great figures of the Orange tradition in Ireland. But above all, I'm including the hundreds of thousands of ordinary Irish women and men today who, by reason of religion, descent, or history, feel closer to that heritage and to that set of cultural institutions and to those historical figures than they do, say, for instance, to Owen Roe O'Neill or to the Fenians. There are hundreds of thousands of people on this island for whom that is their heritage and their mindset. And that huge cohort of the Irish, as a somewhat angry W.B. Yeats reminded the Irish Free State Senate when there was a motion down to end the possibility of divorce in the Irish Free State, he said of that group of the Irish people, which I am describing here as the group represented by the Orange Panel, that they were no petty people. And it's to them that I want you to give your attention today. Because it was famously conceded that Northern Ireland was a cold place for Catholics, but that raised a question: in the south, is it a warm place towards the Orange tradition? Do we respect it? Have we created a society, a history and a culture in which the Orange tradition, as I've just explained it, finds itself in a cold place? Is it the case that while paying lip service to the symbolism of the tricolour, we regard the Orange Panel, Orangism, the Anglo-Irish tradition, the Scots-Irish tradition, and all the heritage of religious and philosophical Protestants as somehow less Irish than the green Gaelic Catholic panel in our flag? And I think it's true that the great majority of people of the Republic still have difficulty in according genuine parity of esteem to the Orange tradition in Irish history. We talk about Protestants and dissenters, and we honour them when, as in the case of Tone, Lord Edward Fitzgerald, Emmett Davis, the United Irishmen, and many others, they led or joined in the revolutionary separatist movements of their times. But there is a marked reluctance on the part of many Irish people south of the border to see the Orange non-Catholic, non-Gaelic tradition as truly Irish. And there may be sound historical reasons why that attitude persists, including identification of true Irishness with the downtrodden, dispossessed and discriminated against section of the people following on penal laws, confiscations, evictions, transportation and famine. And all of that is historically understandable, but I suggest to you that it's an incomplete view of Irish history. Now, we're all products of our histories, but we aren't prisoners of our history. And while understanding and learning from history, it's our role, I believe, as citizens of a democracy to build and to fashion our children's history. You don't have to become an out-and-out revisionist or to start to doubt the truth of everything you value to readdress these issues with an open mind. I think we can ask ourselves whether, looking forward, there isn't room for a new era of understanding and of generosity and for a great change of heart. And I think in the South we still need that great change of heart. We need to look to the real challenge of Irish unity and ask ourselves on what foundations it may be built. And the most obvious challenge is that of attitude. If we aspire to sharing the entire Ireland in unity with the Orange tradition, is it reasonable to hope for such unity while we collectively fail to accord to the Orange strand in our society some public friendship and identification, some respect and some admiration? And I want at this point just to pay warm public tribute to President Mary McAleese and her husband Martin for their leadership and their example on this important issue. It's they who have been building bridges, both in private and in public, between the Irish state and Orange and Loyalist people in Northern Ireland. They've shown respect to people who've had little or no respect from many quarters in the past. Martin and Mary McAleese have shown that they take the Orange panel of the tricolour seriously, and I deeply regret to say that in their early efforts in this regard, they were initially viewed with some suspicion by elements within the Irish establishment who favoured a more traditional role, not merely for the presidency, but also for old attitudes. By meeting and talking to Orange and Loyalist people and groups in Northern Ireland, and by inviting them to Áras an Uachtaráin, and by engaging with them, Martin and Mary McAleese have begun the process of building respect, trust and appreciation between Orange and Green. And particularly when the architecture of the Belfast Agreement, which is by no means perfect, results in a degree of institutionalised political polarisation. The McAleese's initiatives have been all the more important, and I believe that they're based on total sincerity and that they're totally lacking in guile. They seem to understand the new text of Article 2 of our Constitution, which acknowledges that Irish nationality and identity must be based on friendship towards and identification with all the Irish people in all the diversity of their identities and traditions. And as their 14 years in Áras an Uachtaráin begins to draw to a close, and I don't want to prematurely start the wind down here, I feel it's appropriate to say that the greatest expression of gratitude which the Irish people I think does owe them and can give to them is the reassurance that the bridges that they have been building will not be allowed to crumble or to decay. I want to emphasise another thing here this afternoon, that enhanced respect for the Orange panel does not imply downgrading or reducing our respect and love for things green. Respect and esteem are not a zero-sum game in the sense that any enhancement of the Orange must be at the expense of the status and the value that we accord to the Irish language and our rich Gaelic culture. On the contrary, friendship and esteem are in that rare category that the more you give, the more you have to give. And I believe that all strands of Irishness benefit from recognition and value being given generously to each of them. We rightly value and treasure the Irish language. Unlike the English language, it's unique to Ireland, and in that sense it's more Irish than the English language. But in another sense, the Old English, the planters and the Orange strands of modern-day Ireland have always spoken English, and their descendants are Irish. And it's true to say that they are uniquely Irish. To take an example, a South Antrim Presbyterian is as uniquely Irish as a North Antrim Glens Catholic. Both have strong historical Scottish links, but neither is anything less than uniquely Irish. You won't find them anywhere else in the world. And it boils down to this. I'm suggesting to you that we have to see the Orange panel in our flag and all that it represents as uniquely Irish, just as uniquely Irish as the Ireland of the Gael. In a recently published book called Outside the Globe, Protestants and Irishness in Independent Ireland, an skilled academic called Heather Crawford has examined issues that we all know are there, namely whether the social experience and status of Southern Protestants in the context of history, education, marriage, segregation, language and convention is that of a people who feel themselves or are seen as less Irish than their Catholic neighbours. And she raised the fair question in the book whether Southern Protestants are regarded by themselves or by others as having really an authentic Irish identity. And Heather Crawford's book quotes one Southern Protestant in a letter to the Irish Times in 2005, and this struck me very forcibly. This was somebody writing, obviously based on a lifetime of experience. And in her letter to the Irish Times, or his letter, I'm not sure what gender the writer was, she said, "We've been unable to fully celebrate and maintain our diverse heritage. The formation, definition and national identity of this state was based on a Roman Catholic and Gaelic tradition. In this exclusively nationalist identity, the vast majority of the Protestant community felt alienated. Our cultural differences were suppressed in a hostile environment. This repression has caused and maintained silence over our cultural demise. The combination of the political, media, sporting and educational system has selectively displayed a cultural and historical amnesia towards us. Today, few Protestants would want to be quoted by name in public if they are saying something even slightly contentious. And when they do have the confidence to speak, they are met with either suspicion, ridicule or contempt, or a fear of a more subtle, isolated persecution." And finished with the sentence, "For a quiet life, we have said nothing." Now, that picture is a very graphic one, and when you think of someone like David Norris, you think, well, it's not entirely true. But nonetheless, even allowing that those are obvious, heartfelt feelings were retrospective and may indeed have been coloured by an unusual degree of sensitivity, and even if they do appear even now in 2010, 5 years later, as a little dated, I think there is a certain ring of truth in them. It's not so long ago that the casual sectarianism was a day-to-day reality in the life of the Republic. And I was recently doing a research project on looking at newspapers from the 1950s and 60s. And, you know, in the newspapers, in the jobs vacant columns, in the small ads in the newspapers, jobs such as messenger boys, counter clerks, domestic servants, regularly featured the religious affiliation of the applicant or the preferred religious taste of the employer. And this was regarded as perfectly normal. That was Ireland in the 1950s and 60s. When I started as a barrister in 1974, it was undoubtedly the case that there was a pattern of Protestant firms of solicitors briefing Protestant barristers and Catholic firms of solicitors doing the opposite. But these things have changed, but they haven't changed utterly in every respect. Now, I believe that the complaint in the Irish Times letter is probably history in the Republic. I think that things have improved from the time to which that letter refers. But I still believe that there's an emotional gap based on different perceptions of what it is to be Irish and based on the notion that the Orange tradition lies outside a single mainstream Irish identity. And that raises the question as to whether we can have a single Irish identity or whether we really do accept that we must aspire to what Article 3 of the Constitution calls all the diversity of their identities and traditions. And I think it's abundantly clear, to me at any rate, that the old idea of the monofilament single Irish identity is unsustainable and unworkable. And that's to say nothing of recent immigration from other parts of the world. And it's certainly that this notion of a single Irish identity is not a viable way of bringing about a model for Irish unity. And if we're to stop talking and thinking in terms of a single Irish identity, I think we should start down the road of not merely reluctantly accepting diversity, but of actively embracing it. Without engaging in total revisionism, any fair-minded Southern historian would concede that there were, for instance, two sides to the Battle of the Boyne, not merely in terms of soldiers, but in terms of, in a moral sense as well. If you go to the Battle of the Boyne heritage site at Oldbridge, this point is made very clear in what is an excellent display. The fact that the Battle of the Boyne was a European battle between huge power blocks in Europe is made plain. And it's also very interesting, as we all know, that the Pope at the time was delighted by the outcome of the Battle of the Boyne. He was very pleased because he was scared that a French-Stuart combination was going to take him on and challenge his power in Italy at the time. So, but we have to remember that from the point of view of the Catholic Irish, the Boyne, the Treaty of Limerick, and the rapid introduction of the penal laws in total breach of that treaty marked a very dark passage for many, many people in this country. But my point is that viewed in European terms, the Boyne was seen as an episode in a continental struggle, and if a good start has been made in that the Battle of the Boyne site at Old Town is now emerging as a major national monument, then perhaps it's about time that we took a look at other aspects of that occasion. And maybe we should actually consider making the 12th a national holiday right across the country, and not just in one part of it. Could an Irish minister in the near future, is it possible to conceive of this, attend a 12th demonstration in Northern Ireland in the same way they now travel the world to attend St. Patrick's Day parades? Or is that impossible for some reason? Yes. Now, could the great motorway bridge across the Boyne be named after the fighting kings? And instead of people expressing astonishment, however genuine, at the smiles on the face of Ian Paisley and Martin McGuinness, who were termed the Chuckle Brothers, can we as a society take real concrete steps to deliver on the challenge of our flag? I was delighted to see a very happy, smiling face of Gareth Fitzgerald and Martin McGuinness on the front of a newspaper the other day. And it did make me think that things are changing in this island, and that attitudes are capable of change as well. But can I tell you one thing? At the St Andrews negotiations, which were momentous in many respects, the deal was sealed on the last day, and the Irish government on that day were aware that it was the wedding anniversary of Ian and Eileen Paisley. And Tony Blair went off and got a silver photo frame for them. But the Irish government came prepared with a bowl fashioned from an elm tree which had been taken from the Battle of the Boyne site. And you should have seen his face light up when that was given to him. Symbols and generosity of heart and imagination and the capacity to think into the mind of another person really does pay dividends. Could our universities once again become open to the young generation of the Orange tradition, as Trinity College undoubtedly was up to the 1960s or 70s? Could we have a north-south type of Erasmus arrangement for young students to learn something of each other's world, each other's institutions? Could our history be taught in schools in a way that creates understanding and sympathy for the Reformed faith and for the values of Protestants, north and south? Could our students be asked to examine why Tone, Emmett, Davis and Parnell shared a sense of Irishness wholly consistent with their Orange Protestant roots? Is the fact that the Anglo-Irish and the Scots-Irish are in the last analysis unique to Ireland and as much an essential component of Irish nationality as the Green Gaelic tradition, is that really something that we passionately believe in south of the border, or is it a mere sterile theorem to which we would give intellectual assent but no emotional agreement? Is history to be taught in southern schools which acknowledges, for instance, and takes pride in the fact that American independence was largely won on the efforts of Ulster Presbyterians? I don't remember learning that at school. Maybe I wasn't the most attentive of pupils, but it was never said to me. Because what I do remember getting drummed into me was that the Irish had come at last of age in America when John Kennedy became president. And I just wonder, are we in a monochrome, monofilament world? And there have been great changes. For instance, the very late acknowledgement by the Irish state that tens of thousands of Irish soldiers died in the First World War, and that their families lost their loved ones in that struggle, That now, which is a north-south issue and in which Paddy Hart, a frequent contributor at this school, played a huge part in getting a cross-island consensus that there was something there that we shared, and some aspect of the unionist Orange tradition that we in the south also valued. Where are the Orange on our state boards? Why have they been so few and far between in our Shannon, when, if you look back to the Irish Free State Senate, they were very heavily and deliberately represented as a matter of moral obligation by the Cosgrave government? And I think it's high time that we follow the President's lead in taking the Orange seriously as people whom we aspire to respect and with whom we aspire to unite. Perhaps we should ask ourselves the question as to whether in 100 years from now, or 50 years from now, this generation will be seen as the generation that did nothing to build on the potential of the Good Friday Agreement, or whether we'll be recorded as the generation that seriously addressed the question of respecting, befriending and engaging as fellow Irish the Orange tradition in Northern Ireland. Now, I think this isn't just an academic issue. I think the stakes are very high. Because at one level, if there isn't a momentum towards a change of heart right across the island, the Good Friday Agreement may turn out to be simply a sticking plaster over an open and infected wound. Or can that agreement be a stage on the path of genuine reconciliation of the Irish in the same sense that Michael Collins spoke of the Treaty of 1921 as being a stage on the road to freedom, part of the path to freedom, the freedom to become, the freedom to achieve freedom? And I say that the stakes are high because without genuine and serious commitment to friendship and reconciliation, the capacity for this island to regress or for the momentum of the Good Friday Agreement to atrophy politically is, I think, ever present. Now, I think that if such friendship, as is referred to in Article 3, is to be brought about, it must start with respect and be maintained by warmth, not mere lip service or political correctness. It must be based on a genuine appreciation of the things the Orange state to be their greatest values. And they say that the Battle of the Boyne was all about civil and political liberty. And it must regard the Orange not as some inconvenient outlier in relation to Irishness, but as a valuable and key determinant of what it is to be Irish. I thought I might just bring to your attention a few little bits of research I was doing recently. There's a very good book, which I recommend to everyone, produced by the UCD Academic Press, Patrick Murray's book, Oracles of God, the Roman Catholic Church and Irish Politics, 1922 to 1937. And in the introduction to the 1922 period, he does a very, very good survey of the Irish hierarchy's attitude to the revolutionary activities of some people, particularly the Fenians and the Young Irelanders and the like, in the 19th century. No less a man than Cardinal Cullen strongly attacked the Home Rule movement. And why did he do that? He said, a Home Rule Parliament would launch its first attack on the liberty of the Church and the interests of religion. That was our Cardinal Cullen said that. And do you know why he said that? Because he'd come to the conclusion that the moving spirit behind the agitation for Home Rule was identical with the revolutionary spirit which had undermined the Catholic religion in France and Italy. Again, that's something which is news to me, or maybe I wasn't paying attention in history class at school. And Cardinal Logue in 1917, and I saw recently at home in a family album Cardinal Logue visiting the Irish College in the company of my grandfather Owen MacNeil at Omeath in County Louth in 1914. But in 1917, he said about the suggestion that there could be an Irish Republic, he said, this is ludicrous if it were not so mischievous. And in 1925, I'll just top it off by telling you what the Bishop of Ossory, Bishop Downey, said in a letter to W.T. Cosgrave. He denounced Wolfe Tone as a frightful swearer, a shameful drunkard, and a liar, possessed by an unchristian hatred of England, a blasphemer who rejoiced in the denouncement and exile of the Pope, events which he compared to the fall of Lucifer, and the hero of modern Bolsheviks as well as Republicans. I only mention all of these things to say that our history is a lot more complex than some of us might think. Now, I believe that there is reason for optimism. I say at one level, I think that the underlying doctrinal and confessional and denominational tensions between the various organised religions on this island are in fact abating. I would put it this way. I think that the great majority of young people today, if they were asked the question, did Jesus envisage a medieval monarchy in Rome as part of his church, or did he, on the other hand, envisage that Henry VIII would be, by divine right, the head of the church in England? The great majority of young people would say that's really a question that answers itself. We're not interested in the answer. And the great majority of young people, I think, when you look at all the rows going on inside various churches in relation to gender, as to whether women can or cannot be priests and the like, and in England as to gender orientation, the great majority of young people would say that their view of Jesus is that he had nothing whatsoever to say about those things, and these arguments are nothing to do with him. And I think the great majority of young people would also say that this preoccupation with gender, sex, and the reproductive act are things which don't exactly feature large in any of the four Gospels. And I only make that point to say that I think that things are moving on and that some people are being left behind. But that doesn't mean that the unity or union issue or that the green and orange issue is just going to be consigned to history in some way. I think that there is reason to be optimistic. And I think that in Northern Ireland in particular, there's a growing realisation that orange and green are interdependent economically, that their future, their prosperity and their happiness on either side of that divide depends on the future prosperity and happiness of the other group in that society. And I hope that this optimism will put an end to what was happening and to some extent is the outcome of 30 years of the Provisional IRA's campaign of violence, which was that Northern Ireland was slowly developing into a Belgian-type cantonised society where two groups of people were moving physically apart and rearranging themselves geographically, much like the Flemings and the Walloons in Belgium. I don't think that is happening anymore. And I think that now there is reason to hope that Northern Ireland is going to be a society in which the two traditions not merely are represented together, but also work with each other and value and respect each other. I hope that that society is coming about. And you know, when you see on BBC radio, television GAA covered in depth, when you see Thomas the Tank Engine in Irish on UTV, when you see Cayley programmes and the traditional music programmes in the evening on BBC Two television, a parity of esteem is emerging in Northern Ireland. And I don't think, while some people may feel that it's being used as a battering ram to score political points, I think that in the end we should take the optimistic view and take the view that that's not what it's all about. It's about just genuinely mutual self-respect. Now, there are some people who say that internal reconciliation in Northern Ireland and a long period of peace and stability should take precedence over any consideration of Irish unity, and that there should be really very little debate on the subject because it only inflames feelings, deep-seated feelings, which are better left to subside. There are others who will say that the union or unity issue should not be spoken about at all, and that Northern Ireland should simply be left to work out on an intercommunal basis some modus vivendi between the two traditions. And there are still others who will say that Southerners don't know the raw reality of living alongside the Orange, and that they should defer to and trust the views of Northern Catholics on this issue. Now, I understand all those views, and I know that they are held in a heartfelt way by many people. But I don't think that Northern Ireland can simply be left to solve itself. And I do believe that Southern attitudes, as with that event with Ian Paisley and the wooden bowl, Southern attitudes and Southern gestures can be a transformational catalyst for Northern attitudes. And if harmony and friendship, the phrase used in the Constitution, is part of the way forward, it must be worked for in the way that the MacGillises have done in the South as well. It can't simply be left to the next first citizen for action. It concerns us all, and it demands a willingness to change our ways at the level of both thinking and of emotion. It demands of us generosity of spirit and a warmth of imagination, a positive inclination to empathise with the objects of that much-needed friendship. And while true friends are never asked to become uncritical of each other and not to be realistic about each other, they must also always have and show to each other a great deal of respect. And above all, these days, when a small group of dissident political psychopaths and cynical would-be revolutionaries such as the Ash'ari group cling to the belief that Mother Ireland is somehow still crying for the blood of Irish police constables in the north, and that she wants to keep alive the prospect of some future Balkan-style intercommunal war in Northern Ireland. Those of us, including myself, who consider ourselves true Republicans, cannot remain passive spectators when we are called upon to be friends. Our tricolour of reconciliation is often to be found in the hands of political haters and wreckers and their dupes, and they use it to express a desire for coercion of others. And I suggest to you that the best way of seeing off the dissidents is to set our hand to the truly Republican task of creating friendship on this island based on respect and friendship between orange and green, north and south, and that is the true message of our flag. Thank you very much.